Hello, this is Naren Single Phase Digital Control Starter model ODOLR with Overflow off feature. So the main advantage of using this starter is the starter turns off the motor as soon as the overhead tank fills up. So along with this important feature, we have overload protection, dry run protection, a motor off timer, and as I mentioned, overflow sensor, overflow cutoff. Okay. So this starter comes with these kind of sensors. Two of these sensors will be given along with the starter. So what you will have to do is you will have to connect these two sensors to the overhead tank to enable the starter to turn off the motor as soon as the overhead tank fills up. So what we'll be doing is every sensor has one wire like this. So what we'll have to do is connect the first sensor at the bottommost point of the overhead tank and draw the wire and connect it to common point. So suppose I'll be using I have these two sensors here with the package. I'll be using one of the sensors, connecting this sensor at the bottommost point of the overhead tank, and I'll be drawing this wire and connecting it to common point. Okay, this point here, common point. Okay, similarly I'll take the other set of sensor. I'll connect this sensor at the 3/4 level or a little above that. So the placement of this sensor should be such that whenever the water touches this sensor, the second sensor, the motor turns off. Okay, almost near the top of the overhead tank. Okay, so this wire has to be drawn again and should be connected to high level here. So the first sensor will be connected to common, this connector, and the second sensor will be connected to high level. I hope the placement of sensors are clear. So once these sensors are placed, this starter will automatically turn off the motor as soon as the water touches the high sensor mark. Okay, and the display will show will read as tank full off whenever the water fills up the overhead tank. Okay, so I'll be powering on the display. We'll just see how the display looks. So before that, we'll just go ahead and have a look at the connections. So the starter will have 5-way connector. The first two connectors are phase and neutral. These two are again load wires, which have to be of a bigger dia, at least 2.5 square mm or 4 square mm size wires. And the next three are RYBR, the motor cables, which have to be connected here. So this is about the connections. So we'll now go ahead and have a look at the display. So as you can see on the display, the first line reads the incoming voltage or the input voltage, and next to that is L, that is low setting, and H, the high setting. Low and high are the dry run and overload settings respectively. And on the second line you can see amp 00. This means this is the ammeter reading or the current driven by the motor. Since the motor is off now, the current driven by the motor is 00. So this particular reading shows some numbers as soon as the motor turns on. Okay. So now we'll have a look at the settings now. We'll first see how to set the off timer. So this starter has the inbuilt feature of setting the motor off time. So meaning you will be turning on the motor manually, so the starter automatically turns off the motor after this time is elapsed. Okay, so you'll have to take a tester and rotate, place this on the off time knob, the green color one, the first knob, and rotate it on the right hand side. The numbers which are there in the brackets are the time, off time set. So you can rotate it towards the right hand side to increase that number and towards the left hand side to decrease the number. So suppose you want the motor to run for 30 minutes, I'll be setting this to 30. So this particular numbers are set to 30. Okay, so this means you will be turning on the motor. So after 30 minutes the motor will automatically be turned off with the message timeout. So suppose within this 30 minutes the overhead tank gets filled up, so that will be taken the higher priority, and the motor turns off immediately. Suppose if the tank fills up in 15 minutes time, the motor will turn off and it will indicate as tank full. Okay, I'll be demonstrating that soon. So I hope the off timer settings are clear. The maximum off time that can be set is 120 minutes, that is 2 hours. So you can set it at 1 minute resolution. Okay, so next we'll go ahead and have a look at the dry run and overload settings. So the average consumption for theoretical consumption for 1 HP motor is around 6 amps. So 1 HP motor will consume around 6 amps plus or minus 1 or 2 amps, and 1.5 HP motor should consume of amps about 9 amps, and 2 HP of around 12 amps, and so on. Okay, so suppose we are using a 1.5 HP motor, so it should consume around 9 to 10 amps. So what we'll be doing is we'll first turn on the motor and check the reading here. So we'll check the number of amps consumed in the second line, and then we'll again switch off the motor. So once we know the number or the current consumed by the motor, we'll be going ahead and setting the low and high value, or the dry run and overload settings. So the H will be the high value or the overload setting always, and L will be the low value or the dry run setting. So what happens usually is when the water is good and when everything, the voltage is healthy, motor will draw around, so a 1.5 HP motor should draw around 9 amps. So whenever there is some problem with the motor, or silt gets accumulated, the motor will draw comparatively more ampere. So a motor which should draw around 9 amp will go ahead and consume around 12, 13, 14 amps, and so on. Similarly, when there is no water, or the motor runs without water, that is what we call as dry run condition. In that condition also, motor draws lesser current. That is, a motor which is supposed to draw around 9 amps will draw 8, 7, 6, and so on. So what will be in both the cases, the motor will get, the coils of the motor will get burnt. So we need to avoid that. So what we'll be doing is we'll be setting the low cutoff and high cutoff. Okay, so we'll first see the ampere consumed by the motor here, and then turn off the motor, set the corresponding H and L value. Suppose my motor is drawing around 9 amps, I'll be setting H value to 2 numbers above this. So a 9 amps motor is consuming around 9 amps, so I'll be setting H to around 11 or 12 amps. Okay, 11 amps should be precise. So in order to set the H value, I'll be taking a tester and placing it towards the rightmost knob, that is the green color, which reads H. Okay, so I'll be rotating this towards the left hand side. You can see the value of H decreasing. If I rotate it towards the right hand side, you can see the value of H increasing. Okay, I'll be placing it to around 11 amps because we saw the reading of our motor which was drawing around 9 amps. Okay, so these settings have to be made initially when you're setting up the starter for the very first time, and then you need not worry about this setting at all. Everything will be taken care of. Then we'll go ahead and make the dry run setting. So since it was drawing around 9 amps, I'll be setting the L value to 2 numbers below this. So 9 minus 2 is 7. So I'll be setting L to 7. So in order to set L value, I'll be using the same tester. I'll be placing the tester on this dark blue color knob which reads L. So I'll be rotating the tester towards the right hand side and see the value of L increasing. So I want it to set to 7. So I'll be increasing it to, I'll be rotating this towards the right hand side to increase the L value. Similarly, if I rotate this knob towards the left anti-clockwise direction, the value of L gets decreased. Okay, so these are about the settings. I hope the settings are clear. We'll now go ahead and turn on the motor. We'll see how the readings look. So the motor is currently off. As soon as I turn on the motor, you can see this LED glowing and the current reading here. So I switched on the motor, so you can see this red light glowing, the motor on light, and I'm using a lower HP motor because of which it is drawing around 4 amps. So amp 4 meaning the motor is consuming around 4 amps. So you can also see these 3 numbers which were not there earlier, which appeared right now, 000. This is nothing but the elapsed time. So this is another important feature of this starter. So you can always have a look at this display and figure out for how long the motor has been running since it turned on. Okay, so this number becomes 1 after 1 minute, it becomes 2 after 2 minutes. Similarly, when this time and the time set becomes equal, that is when the motor turns off with the message as timeout. Okay, I hope this is clear. We'll now be demonstrating the tank full feature, or the overhead tank full feature. So what usually happens is when the overhead tank fills up, the common sensor and the high sensor will get short. So that is what I'll be doing right now to demonstrate. So you can have a look at the display, the second line. So as soon as the water touches the high level mark, the motor turns off and the indication tank full off will be displayed on the second line of the display. So another important feature of this starter is whenever the overhead tank is full, even if you try to turn on the starter manually, the starter doesn't hold, or the motor doesn't turn on. This is again an important feature. So either the motor will be turned off even if the timer is full or the tank is full. So I hope the features of this particular starter is clear. So the dry run and overload trippings are demonstrated in our previous videos. I hope you are clear with the dry run and overload tripping. So you can always contact us on 9972243774 for any queries regarding this product. I repeat, it's 9972243774. And one of the important feature of this starter is you need not use water level controllers if you are using this particular starter, because turning off the motor as soon as the overhead tank is already taken care of by the starter. So turning on only has to be done manually. I hope things are clear. Yeah, thank you so much.